Welcome back to our channel. Your 1982, 1996, 2005, or 2010 penny might be worth way more than 1 cent. Look for rare mint errors and special varieties. Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss a valuable find. In early 1982, the rhythmic clang of the Denver Mint's presses echoed against its concrete walls with mechanical certainty. The Lincoln cent rolled out in staggering numbers, unchanged in design, yet invisibly poised on the verge of transformation. Copper, once a quiet hero in metallurgy, had grown expensive. The mint had already begun its calculated transition to copper-plated zinc. But this change wasn't instantaneous. It was staggered, messy, peppered with logistical detours. In this blur between two metals, dies met planchets that weren't supposed to be there, and one of them would end up rewriting the rules. The Lincoln penny design remained untouched. No hint to the naked eye of what was happening beneath the surface. But the back rooms of the mint told another story, one of pallets marked to be retired. Bins filled with leftover bronze blanks tucked behind newer shipments, and press operators who relied more on routine than revised protocol. Hundreds of millions of coins were struck, and between them, a small handful carried a secret alloy that would not be discovered for years. A misfeed in the transition phase, a bronze planchet mixed into zinc production. The product of machinery that never asks questions. One of these coins found its way into a bowling alley in Topeka. A teenager used it for a soda. It rolled through decades of pockets, shoeboxes, drive-through counters, and finally into the hands of a coin roll hunter named Glenn. He didn't consider himself lucky, just observant. And that made all the difference. Glenn had been weighing 1982 cents obsessively for weeks. He read forum threads deep into the night, studied the differences between large and small date diagnostics, memorized the subtle curvature of each numeral. He'd built a miniature lab on his kitchen counter. Digital scale, loop, calipers, reference coins lined up like trophies. One afternoon, while sorting a roll he'd almost dismissed as duplicates, he found a 1982 decent small date. Felt off. He weighed it. 3.11 grams. His eyebrows twitched. He weighed it again. 3.12 grams. He knew what that meant. Modern cents, post-transition, should weigh around 2.5 grams. A deviation that large was rare. He scrutinized the 2 in the date, narrow tail, sharp curve. The 8's loops stacked tightly. A small date. He tilted it under a light, ran his fingertip across Liberty, and whispered to himself, "This might be real." He took no chances. The coin was mailed, insured, and slabbed. The grading service confirmed what he barely allowed himself to believe. It was struck at the Denver Mint in 1982, bore the small date style, and was punched into a bronze planchet, an alloy that had no business being anywhere near a press at that stage in the transition. Glenn hadn't just found a rare coin. He'd found a story. Collectors swarmed to discuss the implications. Official mint documentation suggested all Denver small date cents should have been zinc. Copper planchets were supposedly removed from the floor by spring. But the discovery proved some bronze blanks had survived, hidden in chutes, clinging to outdated bins, slipping into presses by accident or inertia. More examples surfaced. Some lacked the necessary diagnostics, weight too low, date style misidentified, copper-plated zinc pretenders with plated illusions. But a handful matched perfectly. Each was an accident that became intention through survival. In one case, a retired machinist named Harper found one in his father's ashtray tin, long buried under matchbooks and brittle receipts. He remembered his dad using coins to level a wobbly table leg. The cent wasn't just rare. It was an unwitting furniture shim for 20 years. The authentication process became a rite of passage. First, the scale. 3.11 G was the magic number. Then visual clues. Small date diagnostics demanded precision. Large date counterfeits flooded forums, and many hopeful hunters mistook a thick 2 or a wide 8 for treasure. Experienced collectors began producing guides, training others to judge slope, spacing, and serif style. Liberty became a focus point. On true errors, the letters stood proud, clear, clean, with no signs of plating distortion. There were even signs of doubling on some specimens, albeit minor. An extra sliver on the base of the 1, a flicker along the horizontal of the 2. These weren't listed varieties, they were whispers, subtle mutations from overused dies or misaligned hubs. They added personality to each piece. No two coins told exactly the same story. Point one coin, discovered in an old coin jar hidden in an Illinois barn, bore a micro die crack stretching from the 8 to the rim. That diagnostic, though aesthetically insignificant, became a marker. It tied several finds together, suggesting they came from the same die pair during a brief production run. What had initially seemed like isolated flukes began to feel like a coherent anomaly, an unintentional series hiding among billions. Auction houses scrambled to adjust their catalogs. The coin was now a headline, 1982 D small date on bronze planchet. Its rise was meteoric, not because of mass appeal, but because of its contradiction. A coin that simply shouldn't exist, yet did. Early sales were modest, hovering around $15,000 to $25,000. But once multiple grading services added it to their certified population reports, the market warmed. Collectors battled over high-grade examples, especially those with full red luster, sharp strike, and minimal contact marks. One MS-65 sold for $63,000 in a spirited bidding war that spilled into the hallway of a Las Vegas coin convention. Another, graded MS-66 with slight doubling on Liberty, shattered expectations with a private sale north of $100,000. A collector named Rosa purchased a verified example for $72,000. She kept it displayed alongside a transitional 1943 copper cent, an experimental 1974 aluminum prototype, and a set of misaligned 1990s double dies. The bronze 1982 D cent wasn't just rare. It belonged to a lineage of accidents that shaped numismatic legend. Then came the Twist.an estate in Minnesota, sold off hundreds of coins from a late postal workers' collection. Most were circulated, but one 1982 D caught the eye of a buyer who recognized the small date, weighed the coin on site, and felt his pulse skip when it read 3.11 G. It was raw, untouched, ungraded. Later submitted and sealed in MS-64 red, it joined the Hall of Verified Errors. But during study, experts found something new. An abnormal ridge on the rim near the date. Not a post-mint ding. A raised element, possibly a misfeed artifact. This sparked a fresh round of theories. Was the error not entirely mechanical? Was it linked to a feed mechanism glitch that rerouted copper planchets during retooling? The mint remained silent, as is custom with unintended histories. But metallurgists and archivists found nothing in logs to contradict the possibility. And sometimes, silence is the loudest confirmation. The community grew tighter. A shared sense of pride emerged, not just from owning the coin, but from knowing how to look for it. Forums built guides that mix science and storytelling. Words like unexpected, unlisted, and impossible became rallying cries. And in every discussion, someone quoted the weight again, 3.11 grams. Like a password, like a promise. Glenn, the original discoverer, received offers reaching $95,000. He declined them all. For him, the coin represented a journey, not wealth. A reminder that questions lead somewhere, that the edge between ordinary and rare is thinner than most expect. One night, he mailed a handwritten note to the mint with a copy of his certification label. Just 4 lines. I found your mistake. Thank you. She's doing fine. Sincerely, Glenn. No reply ever came, and yet the coin endured. The very rare 1982 DUS 1-cent penny, bearing a small date and struck mistakenly on a bronze planchet, remains a paradox wrapped in copper. Born in a year of transition, forged from misplaced metal, and preserved by the curiosity of people willing to measure what others overlook. Its value, depending on grade, tone, and diagnostic clarity, has settled between $45,000 to $125,000. Not bad for a cent meant to fade quietly into history. In 1996, the copper-plated zinc 1-cent penny pressed through the mint like any other year, its familiar sheen blending into the billions that passed through vending machines and jeans pockets. It was not an anniversary year. There were no commemorations or redesigns expected. Lincoln remained anchored on the obverse, steady and unchanged. At the Denver Mint, rhythmic clattering filled the corridors as presses thundered through their routines. Everything was standard, at least it should have been. .2 dies met thousands of planchets with precision. Nothing in the production logs raised an eyebrow. The Lincoln Memorial stood sharp on the reverse. "In God We Trust," etched cleanly across the top. The year 1996 sat confidently beneath Lincoln's profile, flanked by the small D mint mark. But amidst that perfection, something tiny misaligned. Years later, a collector named Jeremy, who prided himself on never buying a coin he hadn't personally examined, found himself leafing through flea market tables outside Cincinnati. He wasn't looking for anything legendary. He preferred the odd finds, coins with just enough personality to warrant a second look. A tray of loose cents sat under a patched umbrella, and Jeremy flicked through them like pages in a book, until he paused. The 1996 D-cent had a strange shimmer under daylight. Not from wear, not from luster, something in its surface tension felt off. He held it up. The thickness caught his attention first. He'd handled enough cents to feel their weight through calloused fingers. This one felt wrong, slightly too heavy. He didn't hesitate. He bought it for 50 cents and dropped it in his shirt pocket like a secret. Back home, the scale read 3.09 grams. Not definitive, but suspicious. Standard zinc cents weigh around 2.5 grams. Give or take wear. Copper cents settle closer to 3.11 grams. He performed the ring test, a clean ping instead of the usual dull clink. Copper. And then he looked closer. The fields were clean, untouched by corrosion or grime, but the lettering around the rim, especially on Liberty, had an unusual doubling. Not dramatic, subtle enough to be dismissed. But Jeremy didn't dismiss it. Forums pushed back. Machine doubling, they claimed. Lighting, others said. But Jeremy chased another path. He contacted a coin grading service with his discovery, requesting metallurgical testing. The results came back quietly revolutionary. Solid copper composition. A 1996 D1-cent coin struck not on the usual copper-plated zinc planchet, but on a legacy bronze planchet, the kind last officially used in 1982. That error shouldn't exist. There had been no transitional year in 1996, no split composition like in 1982. The use of copper was long phased out. By then, copper-plated zinc was the standard and had been for years. The implications were staggering. A misplaced blank from a previous decade, or an anomaly with no clear origin. Mint records showed nothing of it. No leftover copper planchets were logged. No experimental strikes authorized. And yet, Jeremy held one in hand. The weight, the ring, the metallurgical report all confirmed copper. And the doubling? It became its own mystery. A closer inspection under high magnification revealed it wasn't mechanical doubling from die wear, but classic hub doubling, a misalignment during the die creation process. The 9 in 1996 showed a split tail. The Liberty tilted at inconsistent angles. The coin wasn't just on the wrong planchet. It had been struck with a die that had received multiple impressions improperly aligned, so now the error had layers. A composition anomaly and a doubled die. Wrapped into 1 cent, he called it the sleeper. Collectors buzzed. You couldn't compare it to the 1982 D-small date bronze error directly. This was unique. The conditions for error weren't systemic. They were isolated, accidental, maybe even experimental. Theories swirled. A mint employee testing recycled planchets? An errant blank lost in a bin for years? A rogue anomaly that snuck past controls? But none of them stuck with certainty. Another specimen appeared in a collector's group chat months later. Similar weight, mild doubling, solid copper. It wasn't identical, but it proved the error wasn't singular. 2 examples changed the conversation. And then, almost theatrically, a third surfaced during a coin show appraisal. An older gentleman handed it over with a half smile and said, "Found this years ago in a parking meter return. Always felt heavier. Never bothered checking." 3 examples. All weighed near 3.11 grams. All struck at the Denver Mint. All showed varying levels of hub doubling. The market didn't hesitate. Word spread through online auction listings, through forums, through careful Reddit threads and numismatic podcasts. The doubling wasn't visible to everyone. Took patience. The Liberty often revealed it first. The L split at the vertical stroke. The Y tilted with a shadow. Some coins showed light spread in 1996, along the bottom curve of the 6. These weren't dramatic errors, they were elegant, whispering imperfections. Paired with copper planchets, they became mythic. Auction houses took note. Coin grading services created new notations. 1996, D double die, bronze planchet. Premiums escalated. The first public sale clocked in at $27,500. Then the second set the bar at $38,000. But insiders knew the estimates were already outdated. The demand was emotional, nostalgia and rarity merged. The price didn't just reflect scarcity. It reflected the story. What makes a coin valuable isn't only the metal, the strike, the condition. It's the journey. These cents had traveled decades without fanfare, echoing through forgotten vending machines and shoeboxes. They lived quiet lives until someone listened. That kind of rarity, hidden, waiting, fascinates collectors far more than headlines. Then came a fourth coin, graded pristine, with doubling clearer than any of the others. Its liberty danced, and its "In God We Trust" shimmered with misalignment. Weighing in at 3.11 grams, its provenance traced back to a military base vending machine near El Paso. It became the benchmark, the coin against which the others were judged. The sale made headlines across numismatic circles. Private collectors bid silently. Institutions considered acquisition. When the dust settled, the final price, $115,000. Jeremy still kept his original discovery in a climate-controlled case, next to his grandfather's dog tags and a note that read, "Value is often found in the overlooked." He'd received offers as high as $87,000, but declined. For him, the coin had already served its purpose. It had proven that sometimes the machine stutters and sometimes that stutter becomes legend. The very rare 1996 US 1-cent penny, struck on bronze and marked by doubling, transitioned from an everyday object to a secret masterpiece of minting history. Today, its value echoes in whispers from $40,000 to $115,000. In 2005, the presses at the Philadelphia Mint spun with mechanical certainty, churning out copper-plated zinc cents in endless repetition. The Lincoln penny, unchanged in design since 1959, bore the aging profile of the 16th president with stoic consistency. No major redesign was scheduled, and the cent retained its status as a humble participant in everyday exchanges. Yet that year, deep within the endless sacks of circulating currency, one coin diverged ever so slightly from its kin, a deviation so minute that it would take years to catch the attention it deserved. The operations that year were unusually fast-paced. A minor equipment overhaul mid-quarter added urgency to the coinage timeline. Amid this flurry, procedures that typically safeguarded die alignment and planchet uniformity were rushed, cut short, or temporarily relaxed. The consequences of haste are often invisible until someone asks the right question. Among those who asked was Nina, a schoolteacher from Michigan, who'd inherited a coin box from her grandfather that contained decades of spare change. She wasn't a numismatist, not in any formal sense. But she appreciated patterns, logic, and history. She decided to sort them one summer, more out of nostalgia than ambition. At first glance, the 2005 Lincoln cent she found was unremarkable. She held it up under lamplight, just enough shine to catch the edges. But the portrait of Lincoln looked thicker, as if the lines beneath his cheekbone had doubled. She blinked. A trick of shadow? She placed it aside. The next day, with a magnifier, she looked again. The liberty seemed faintly doubled. Not harsh like machine doubling, this was gentler, more layered, like an echo frozen in copper. Then came the weight test. Most copper-plated zinc cents hover around 2.5 grams. This one, oddly, held firm at 3.12 grams. She tried again. 3.11. Then once more. Still heavier. That wasn't typical. That was copper. The penny was struck in 2005. Copper core planchets hadn't been used for regular circulation since 1982. She studied the edge, no streaks of zinc, no signs of plating. The coin felt authentic. She didn't trust herself alone. She shipped it to a grading service, accompanied by a letter explaining her tests, her doubts, and her gut feeling. Weeks passed. The envelope returned sealed, the coin slabbed. Label, 2005 Lincoln cent, wrong planchet error, bronze composition. And below, smaller text, double die obverse, class 2. The reaction online was modest at first. Unlikely, some said, could be misattributed. But pictures surfaced. Clear doubling on Lincoln's eye and cheek. A ripple in God We Trust. And the copper tonality. Deep, warm, refusing to reflect light the same way zinc did. Eventually, the skeptics quieted, replaced by curiosity. How did a bronze planchet enter the system over 20 years after the composition switch? Theories emerged. An older blank, stuck in machinery, finally dislodged. A Mint employee mishandled planchet stock during testing. A leftover proof blank misfed into circulation dyes. None were confirmed, but the doubt did little to diminish fascination. This wasn't a transitional year. The anomaly existed without a time-stamped rationale. It was wild, unaccounted for. Enigmatic. Nina's coin went viral on collector threads, especially after a second emerged from an estate sale in Texas. Similar doubling, similar weight, slight variation in the 5 of the date sharper serif. Both coins were sent to metallurgical labs. The readings came back 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc. Authentic pre-1982 bronze composition. Experts began calling them phantom pennies. Not prototypes, not trials, just mistakes that escaped notice. Auction houses sniffed opportunity. The second coin sold at a modest $21,000, its doubling less pronounced. But Nina's, graded MS65, full copper composition, Class 2 double die, entered an elite catalog. The pre-auction estimates danced unpredictably. Some said $35,000. Others whispered 6 figures. Collectors debated if the error was limited to a single press or an isolated incident. Speculation grew, and so did enthusiasm. The sale went public late autumn. The bidding began with hesitance $10,000, then quickly $25,000. But as the doubling and bronze anomaly gained attention, bids snowballed. By the 12th round, a phone bidder pushed the offer to $96,000. A final bid closed at $105,000. The crowd exhaled. The 2005 US 1-cent penny, intended to be unremarkable, had defied expectations. A wrong planchet struck with double die, an anomaly born of oversight and sealed in copper. The rarity made it valuable. The mystery made it legendary. Today, depending on condition and die markers, specimens fetch between $34,000 to $105,000. And perhaps more, if someone finds one tucked in a coffee can under the sink. In 2010, the Lincoln cent was no stranger to scrutiny. With the recent adoption of the shield reverse, an emblem meant to reinforce unity and strength, collectors turned a curious eye toward the fresh design, eager to trace subtle shifts in relief, texture, and tone. To the average person, it was simply a penny. For those who stared harder, however, 2010 became a year of quiet revelations. In the corridors of the Philadelphia Mint, machinery churned with repetitive clarity, copper-plated zinc planchets pressed between hardened dies with rhythm that matched any assembly line. The presses did not care for symbolism. They cared for efficiency. And on one shift, no whistle blown, no warning sounded, the formula forgot its own rules. Planchets were inspected with high-speed cameras, weighed by sorting arms, guided along chutes slick with conveyor lubricant. Tens of millions were copper-plated zinc, carrying the standard 2.5 G weight that defined the modern penny since the early 1980s. There were test strikes that occurred under closed doors, metals minted with legacy materials, and a few leftover blanks for special purposes. But none of those were supposed to cross paths with ordinary circulation. That's why it made no sense when a machine operator noticed a press sounding different one afternoon in June. The cadence wasn't off, but something about the echo, the metallic report, rang too deep. She chalked it up to floor vibration. Noise is cheap, but sound can be honest in ways data isn't. The coins went out. They crossed hands, counters, and coin rolls. Somewhere in Cleveland, a 7th-grade science teacher named Rick emptied his classroom jar for a fundraiser. His students weighed pennies on kitchen scales, recorded mass, plotted histograms. And then came the anomaly. A single 2010 cent that broke expectations, 3.11 grams. It didn't belong. Rick thought it was machine error, so he recalibrated the scale. Same result. Tried again with backup. Still heavier. He looked at the coin's surface. The copper wasn't just tinted, it had depth. Where zinc had a dull sheen that looked ready to flake at the slightest scratch, this penny had warmth. Its edge didn't glint sharply, it glowed. The shield reverse showed exceptional detail. The motto E pluribus unum felt almost three-dimensional. The fields around it were unusually smooth, almost proof-like. But this was no proof coin. It was worn, circulated, yet somehow magnificent. He took the coin to a local show. A dealer laughed politely. "Nice oddity," he said, "but probably a counterfeit." Rick disagreed. "It has the weight, the feel, the resonance." That's when the dealer paused. Most fakes didn't replicate the density properly, and the fields were clean, too clean for amateur plating. He ran his magnet near the rim. Nothing. Zinc could carry faint attraction with embedded iron from some forgeries. This coin didn't twitch. Grading services hesitated. "You're saying this is a bronze planchet?" Rick nodded. "And struck in 2010. The intake notes looked skeptical, but the lab results didn't. Composition: 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc. Not plated, not post-mint tampered. It was real. A legacy blank struck with modern dyes. A mistake from somewhere deep inside the system." Word spread in waves. A blog posted the story, half speculation, half miracle. Another collector, Mary from Indiana, remembered a heavy 2010 cent she'd set aside for being too fancy. She weighed it, 3.11 grams. Sent it off. Same result. Now there were two. Speculation flared. Was this a pocket of leftover planchets used accidentally? Or something intentional, an internal strike for ceremonial purposes, mistakenly released? Some theorized the mint had allocated legacy copper blanks for a metal run and inadvertently mixed them into the penny press. A retired technician said he remembered a bin labeled "old stock," never confirmed disposed. He never checked if it moved. "Sometimes bins move themselves," he said with a shrug. A third coin emerged from a pawn shop tin in Tampa. This one bore a strange doubling across Liberty. Not dramatic, but shadowed. Under magnification, the spread was clear.
A doubleti.
That meant not only a wrong planchet, but a layered minting error, a die impression failure compounded by material misplacement. The odds were astronomical. The coin sold privately for $55,000. The buyer was never named. There were naysayers. Copper planchets in 2010 were impossible, they said.
Die Dubling was exaggerated.
Many posted discoveries that turned out to be lighting tricks or plated novelty coins. The market held fast. Only metallurgical proof moved prices. Only full diagnostics won bids. Then came a twist no one expected. An independent metallurgist, studying trace element dispersion in copper alloys across decades, ran comparative scans. He found that the copper used in the 2010 era coins had elemental ratios matching late-stage bronze strikes from 1981 and early 1982. That meant the blanks had been produced 30 years earlier, then either misallocated or forgotten. The planchets weren't experimental, they were leftovers. That tiny discovery added provenance to mystery. Collectors love age. They love continuity. Now they had both. A fourth coin entered the scene with near-perfect surfaces. Full red luster. MS 66 grade. It bore no doubling, but its strike was unusually crisp. Some speculated it had been struck early during the die's lifespan, before fatigue distorted impressions. It crossed the auction block at $98,000, eclipsing even the famous transitional errors from 1982. No one blinked. It was the new standard. Every detail mattered. The shield reverse showed full vertical striations. 1 cent popped from the surface like it had been engraved. 2010 sat upright, symmetrical, with just enough rounding to suggest high die pressure. The rims had no splits, no plumes of plating, just honest copper shoulders holding tight to their design. Collectors began to memorize diagnostics. The weight, the resonance, the metal's patina that refused to age with haste. Rick, who started it all, never sold his coin. He kept it in a wooden box beside his lesson plans. He said he wanted his students to learn that science doesn't just find what you expect. It also reveals what you forgot to look for. Meanwhile, Coin rolls from 2010 were opened with reverence. Collectors ran ring tests across kitchen tables. Every 3.11 gram flicker drew breath. Some turned out false alarms. Others joined the Hall of Miracles. By 2015, 6 authenticated examples had surfaced, each a bronze-cent time capsule struck in an era where copper was no longer welcome. The coin's legend grew not because it shouted, but because it whispered precisely. Rarity has gravity, and gravity, when copper-backed, makes silence feel valuable. The very rare 2010 US 1-cent penny, struck on a bronze planchet with standard shield reverse dies, lives as a quiet rebellion against system perfection. It drifted from procedure, escaped surveillance, and convinced the world that memory, in metal, is worth listening to. Its current value, depending on condition, provenance, and error layering, ranges from $30,000 to $98,000.